Om Vedanta Sara Sarvasvam Jnanam Vijnanam Evacha Ahamatma Nirakaraha Sarvavyapi Swabhavataha Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. It is the essence and totality of the Vedanta, this supreme knowledge, this non-dual wisdom, which tells us, I am the eternal Atman, indivisible, birthless, deathless. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. We welcome you here. And namaste to all beings, salutations. We're coming to you from SRV's home in the Hawaiian Islands. In this month of July, which is coming to its end with its specific holy days of Guru Purnima and, of course, our Swami Vivekananda's 4th of July, in which he passed into Mahasamadhi. And moving towards the month of August, which will also include a visit to the Portland Ashram, and which holds our holy day of Janmashtami, Sri Krishna's birthday, where we will partake of a puja there and a few more ardent and intrepid souls taking initiation in August into our expanding group, slowly expanding group, which is far flung across the world, checking in from different places. So this modern mechanism allows us to come together on this day for 2 one-hour sessions. And I just quoted from the Avadhuta Gita about that non-dual wisdom that tells us that I am the eternal indivisible self. That beautiful conclusion of the Vedanta, which brings into focus the non-origination of all things and all beings, the rising and falling out of that eternal ocean of Brahman, of the many waves, manifestation and expression, which these revealed scriptures of India, which we favor so highly, are always bringing up as the topic and subject of our lives. That is the main focus of our lives, is if we are walking around not only containing that Atman within us, but we're also seeing a manifestation of it everywhere and in everything. And that causes us to have a companion, an eternal companion with us all the time. Maybe from even his childbirth, and maybe you have also felt this. His birth as a child, Sri Ramakrishna felt this companion with him all the time, and would even talk to it and speak with it as if it was both within and externally. And we know Holy Mother, Sri Sharda Devi, had 4 goddesses attending her when she was a young girl, who went everywhere with her. And she just thought that every young girl had 4 goddesses going around with her. So she never mentioned it to anyone until she mentioned it to her parents once. And they looked at her with wide eyes, of course. But at a certain age, then they disappeared from her outer view and went inside. And so, as if to prove the all-pervasiveness of Brahman. I was looking at one of the non-dual scriptures recently and came upon those 3 apologies that the non-dualist makes. Please forgive my sin, he says, for going on pilgrimage. Why would he say that? Because it's making it seem like you're just in one place. So when you're everywhere and all pervasive, so please forgive me that sin. And then he goes on and says, please forgive me for meditating upon you. Please forgive me that sin. Why would he say that? Because Brahman is beyond the mind, which meditates. And he also talks about, please forgive me for singing your names and praises and glories, because that puts God into a name and into a form. So that very same non-dual scripture nonetheless praises the gurus, praises the scriptures, praises all the activities of spiritual life, as if to say that we need to keep in contact with this nameless, formless, non-dual reality. I'll be giving a talk at a new place called New Thought Church again in a couple weekends or so, or next weekend maybe. And I'll be speaking about that subject, ajati, or non-origination, thy birthless, deathless nature. It's not something that crosses the mind of even the devotee all that much, which is why probably these three apologies are made by this great soul, as if to remind him of the all-pervasiveness and transcendence of divine reality. Keep that in mind all the time, day to day. And that enforces the presence of that indivisible, and you might say invisible, reality that's all around us and within us. It's taking on all these forms. And so Sri Ramakrishna used to say that if you can worship in the temple, the image in the temple, then why can't you come out of the temple and see the flowering fruit tree, do a puja there? A puja is going on at all times, everywhere. That is this worship of the divine. So you don't want to just keep it in one place only, but you can keep it in one place for long enough to concentrate on it and remember it. So these are what these early practices are all about, is to remind the mind to focus in on non-dual reality, and that one-pointed focus right there, as Krishna says, combination of the third eye, energy in the head, and the presence of the Lord in the heart. Bring those together into one focus, and then pass your time contentedly and be free, as Shankara says, and have that condition of samadhi. So we know that hearing of it, speaking of it, and then realizing it are the three ways: Shruti, Yukti, and Anubhava, those are called. Three ways in which the seers tell us to keep this non-dual reality at the center of our being. And that's what Swamiji told the young Narendra, or the young Swami Vivekananda. He says, he heard this non-dual knowledge, and he heard it from the Ashtavakra Samhita, this beautiful non-dual scripture. And he heard that knowledge. He said, now that you've heard this, you keep that at the center of your being. You can hide it away, but deliver that first to people so they'll hear it, and then they can meditate on it over time. And it's as if you're calling someone from far away, and that presence is coming closer and closer the more you think about it, and the more you act on it, and the more you hear about it. So all of those three great truths, or proofs of truth, also called Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana by Shankara and the Vivekachudamani. Those are great practices that you can do daily without even lifting a scripture, or without even moving from your seat. So we're reminded of this every time we see each other's face. And every time you look at your hand, see at the tip of my fingers, there's Mahalakshmi, and base of my fingers, there's Saraswati, in the middle of my fingers, there's Sri Krishna. So I should remember these great souls, these great beings, when I look at my hand. And so this divine reminder shores us up in this difficult world and gives us other options than just to brood or to worry or to suffer or to enjoy even. In fact, you can get exquisite enjoyment from that kind of focus and extract it out of everything. Another of the great benefits is this imperviousness that you have towards phenomena. That's a very wonderful principle of both Vedanta and Buddhism, this imperviousness to phenomena. As you watch it flow by all the time, but you remain constant as you see it. The witness consciousness, it's called in some circles. So these are great boons and blessings that we feel Divine Mother bestows upon us if we will only keep our attention focused upon her, on her feet of bliss. So warming you up to our Saturday morning topic, which is always the same, at the same time variegated, then maybe you can come forward and join in, tell us about your week in Brahman, and even your experiences of encountering the world bewitching Maya and how you gained victory over it. What you studied. What question came up in your mind?
I've been reading the Holy Mother book. I just started it because I want to know more about her life. I feel like I've heard a lot through you, but I've actually never sat down and read her whole book and her whole life story. And it's incredible. I mean, just from the get-go, just the presence that she brought into this world. And I know it just seems like she embodied this idea of purity like no other being has ever embodied. And I was just wondering if we could speak on purification and the importance of it and how it relates to the practice that we have through Vedanta and the Ramakrishna lineage. Because growing up, I grew up in like a Christian world, like most of us did in America. And I feel like the ideas of purity in Christianity left me feeling really weird. But when I learned about it through Vedanta, it made a lot more sense. And I was just wondering if we could kind of speak on that possibly. Thank you.
Yes, we can. So purity is chit shuddhi. Shuddhi is, or shuddha is that word in Sanskrit we use in the Vedantic context. And we know there are three kinds of purity: outer, that is in location, you might say. That's why we have an altar. So what I was just saying in the introduction today is that you want to keep your mind on a presence. But, please forgive me, Lord, for having an altar. Putting you in one place would be what we were talking about. But that's actually called dravya shuddhi, or purity of location, of things, of elements, because you've got a candle there, you've got an incense there, you've got flowers there, like the image and the flowers behind me that we set up before we started Satsang. So that's an outer purity, and it helps you to remember that it's inside. And so when you do this mudra at it, that means what is there is also here. So you actually do that in the puja. You do this mriga mudra toward the images, like in our case, Sharda Ramakrishna Vivekananda, and then you say what is there is here. That's the significance of it. So it should lead to this next level of purity, and then eventually lead to expanded feeling of bhakti inside. These are the devotional practices. So your point, so I stay close to it, is that when you hear about this from the standpoint of alienation, like I fell, I sinned, and then I met someone who made me feel guilty. then of course that's counterproductive to what we would want to happen in our spiritual lives. We want to feel connection to God, to Mother, to the divine, to the deities, to the Guru, to each other. And we all know that is sort of commonality. It's love, and it even goes beyond compassion in Vedanta. And so those kinds of attributes or qualities are really supreme qualities. As I was writing in one of the God blogs, which we'll talk about in a couple hours here, this idea of love and compassion and worship. So these are designed in our tradition to bring you close. It's a hands-on kind of idea, and the idea is that even if I have committed 1,000 transgressions, and call those 1,000 transgressions a pile of cotton, and then you take a match and you just poof, they're gone. See, so that idea is always in the heart, rather than some sin that's a black mark on your soul. Of course, the non-dual teachings will help us there, because the soul can never be marred or marked, or it can never sin, and it can never become impure. So again, forgive me, O Lord, for talking about purity and impurity both. I mean, you'll find, we've been studying this on Sundays for the last 7 or 8 class series of the Advaita, that he's always talking about going beyond dualities. We heard that in Sri Krishna. It's talking about that in the Gita a lot, but the Advaita also brings it up in this transcendental way. He's keeping his mind more in the witness consciousness, whereas Krishna has to teach this young disciple, Arjuna, on the battlefield of all things. So, but when the Advaita is speaking about it, he's speaking about it always with the non-dual, but he has to set it off and contrast it to duality. So if the soul, if I think of it as being impure, then that's a great detractor to my spiritual life. If I think of it as being pure, then I'm transgressing the non-dual truth, because it's neither pure nor impure. He keeps bringing this point out about the dualities. So you might say conventional religion will go towards trying to purify, and Vedanta takes that and puts it in terms of purify the body, purify the senses. But when you purify the body, you're not looking at it as something vile. You're looking at it as something that that the Lord wants to put on, like an overcoat. Your body should be seen as something that close to the Lord. And if He hasn't put you on yet, then there's something wrong. And so you want to make sure that there's nothing wrong. It's not a matter of guilt. It's a matter of positive action. What is it that's keeping me from my true nature? Is how the non-dualists would put that very same thing. And then you get to senses, and it's not like I used to laugh, to take your eye out and polish it like Captain Bligh or something, and put it back in. It's, oh, my eyes are pure, but it's the relationship of the senses with the objects that has made them impure. Impure how? And attachment has become the defilement. And that's, of course, not in my soul. Attachment and detachment both are not in my soul. See, so I'm going to have to use one to get rid of the other. That is, if I'm attached, I'll have to practice some detachment, and that'll be good for me. But then I'll realize that my soul was always perfect, and that detachment wouldn't have been necessary if I hadn't have been attached in the first place. See, so Sri Krishna talks about that as the thorn in your flesh. You're working outside, and you get one in there, and you can't get it out. So you look at the bush where it came from. Oh, there's more thorns there. I think I'll pick another. So you pick another off and use that second one to pick out the first. And what do? Hold on to them. You toss the thorns away. So both the attachment and the detachment, or the impurity and the purity, or purification in this case, are a necessary move you make in spiritual life. But it has an end. They both have an end in return to your natural state, nectar of naturalness. What do you say? Does that sound
Yeah,
good?
thank you. And it just made me think, it's like spiritual practice is like this funny game where you almost need to be standing at the finish line and watching yourself run the race at the same time. It's like you have to know that you're there the whole time, but you also have to be okay with yourself needing to go through the hurdles of life to get there. It's like a paradox, and it's beautiful. So thank you.
Yes, I like your way of thinking and describing it. It's beautiful. What else can we sit around hobnobbing about?
I have something.
Thank you.
One of the lines in the Bhagavad Gita, which I find continually enigmatic, is when Krishna says, all beings are in me, but I am not in them. And every time I think I've got it, then I get confused about it. So maybe you can give your Vedantic interpretation of it, and as well how we can practice that, what relevance it has in our here on the ground in our day-to-day existence.
Down here on earth, yeah. Well, that very thing came into my mind early on too, and I read the Gita the first time. I wrote an article about it, actually, after a while, just to help myself understand it, and I never released that writing. It's still somewhere in my computer file, but it has to do with the three things that actually Sri Krishna says in the Gita. You probably are aware of them, and you're just teasing it out right now. But this is early on when he tells Arjuna that I am not in them and they are not in me. So it actually is more stark than what you just said. It's not only that we're not in him, in the Lord, but he's not in us either. So that would be back to this, what happened? It means that we have to make this step forward, because the Lord, Sri Krishna said the Lord is helpless. The one time when God is helpless, he said, is when people turn away and won't open up to that divine succor, that beneficial spiritual aid that's always available if we would open the nadi, or the channel to it. But since we've turned away and closed it off, in some beings extremely so, like those people Arjuna is facing on the battlefield, the Duryodhana and the evil clan that the Pandavas are facing. So in such closure, then the Lord would make a statement like that, just like you would if you were amidst a bunch of people and they decided not to listen to you. They just turned away and you couldn't get their attention, and they wouldn't even speak with you. So you have to imagine how the Lord in the body, the avatar form in this case, or other great realized souls feel, when the world puts up such defenses to this inner sanctuary, this inner refuge. I mean, you can read the Beatitudes if you talk about Christianity, and you'll find Jesus talking about it there all the time. So there's that point. The second thing he says, the next thing he says in the succeeding chapters is that I am in them, but they're not in me. And that's the one you brought up. So from this very stark declaration of they're not in me and I'm not in them, it's really from the perspective of basically they're not listening to me. Of course, he knows that he's everywhere. We have to come to know that too in order to open the doors. Knock and it shall be opened would be the teaching. So when it comes to the next level of that statement, then he says, I am in them, but they are not in me. So he's giving Arjuna this next level to contemplate about opening up the doors to this non-dual truth. But at this time, it would be avatar or Ishvara. So you're following me so far? Is that
Yes, yes,
something
but
else?
yeah, but in the version that I'm reading, he's actually saying all beings are in me and I am not in them. And that's in chapter 9.
Hmm.
I think you said just the
So
opposite.
yeah, so the third thing is, this is what I'm getting to. I'm
Oh, I
just
see.
checking in,
Okay.
make sure that we're on the same page.
All right.
All beings are not in me, or all beings are me, but I'm not in it, are in me, but I'm not in them, is
Yes.
how you put it.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's going to be from the perspective of the realized soul, like Krishna is in that case.
Got it. Okay.
And he sees it as clear as it can be, clear as a bell, as they say. And most beings are walking around oblivious to the fact that what we would call Atman is there in everything. But when it comes to a fine conclusion later on in the Bhagavad Gita, when he says, those beings who love me with all their heart and so forth, I am in them and they are in me. Did you find that, sloka? That's how he concludes the whole thing. So that's what I'm saying. It's a 3-part teaching he's delivering to Arjuna. And so that last one is the one we would like to focus in on. Those beings who love me, first and foremost. I am in them and they are in me. So they've realized that the Lord is inseparable from them. And this is how you might say duality graduates to qualified non-dualism, graduates to non-dualism, if you want to talk about it philosophically speaking. So it's a beautiful teaching, but all 3 of those levels are declared in different chapters of the Gita. So we want to be amongst those ones who are of the 3rd category, the non-dual category. People used to ask Sri Sharda Devi after the master had passed, well, he was professing so many religions and realizing so many ideals, gave so many teachings at different levels, and now he's gone. And this order was just beginning, and people were beginning to come and they began to ask, what are we? Because India had so many sampradayas, had so many sects, had so many cults, had so many darshanas, had so many philosophies and religions. How many religions were in India? Jainism, and Buddhism, and Sufism, and Islam. All of these were there in India, and in that great melting pot of religious and philosophical realization. So they would ask her, well, then we're followers of Sri Ramakrishna. He's come and gone. Then what do we call ourselves? And he said, he was a non-dualist. You also are a non-dualist. So this is why we're bringing this out all the time for the Vedantists of this day and age, is that we want to make sure that we accent that level of non-duality that he was exemplifying all the time. And it's so, of course, it's so much obvious in Vivekananda's case. He was so focused in on non-duality and Advaita, and gave the teachings in such a clear way. At the same time, he would dance and sing in India when he went back to India, and throw dust on himself and roll in the dust. And you saw all the markings of this ecstatic bhakta would come out of him when he was more prim and proper back in the Christian world. And when in Rome, do as the Romans do, kind of motto that you follow. But this is a very beautiful thing to declare ourselves to be at least amenable to, if not ensconced deeply in Advaita Vedanta. It's not something that we should look at as a goal in the future, something I'm going to attain later, because that would, of course, be transgressing the law of transcendence of time. So transcendence of mind, transcendence of time, transcendence of sin, transcendence of good and bad, all those things are our birthright as followers of these 3 great souls that we call SRV. and which are all the way back to the very beginning of this cycle of time in India. This eternal truth we speak about, Sanatana Dharma. Namaste.
Namaste. How would you describe? So if someone asks about Advaita Vedanta, and how would you describe it, or what are the goals? What are the achievements? Then how would you describe Advaita Vedanta to others? I just want to be in know of that, having more concrete definition, because we talk about Vedanta in so many different ways. It's good to have like kind of like a clear-cut definition of it. I don't know if it's a good question to ask.
Very good question. It's, of course, simple and profound at the same time. That is, like the Brahma Sutras will go on talking about it for volumes, but it's so simple, and they'll declare that truth. So probably good to take up one of the facets of non-duality, like non-origination or aparinama. And then you begin to understand how close and how precious non-duality is, because I mean, you can't just say, well, I'm a non-dualist and I don't believe in duality, or I don't even want to take the teachings anymore. That's qualified non-duality, because, I'm just who I am, and I can end with that. And people are doing that, declaring that. And I think sometimes jumping to the chase a little bit prematurely, because there's a vast difference between people who are defending themselves against duality and qualified non-dualism and those who are actually experiencing non-duality. You see a very, very definite difference between the two when you meet them, or when you talk to them, or read their teachings, or hear their teachings. So the person that's living in that experience who is the exemplar of it, like Vivekananda, for instance. We believe 100% in him, and we didn't even ever meet him in our lifetimes. That's how powerful the teachings are. But back to my main point, if you can take a few of these facets of non-duality, let's say a parinama means no transformation. So they declare adamantly that Brahman does not transform, and it means it does not change, it's immutable. And so right away you say, well, then it couldn't be born, it couldn't accrue karma while it lived, and it couldn't die, because those are all changes. So just one sword stroke from Mother Kali's sword, because she's the holder of Advaita Vedanta and the protector of it. One stroke like that philosophically puts so much doubt to death, ages of doubt, lifetimes of doubt to death, if you just sit and hold just that one precious facet of the diamond of Advaita Vedanta. And she said that about the master. Oh, he said so many things in his life, and they were all true. But for you, all you need to do is just take one of those things and contemplate on it, and that will be enough for you. So those things that you want to concentrate on wouldn't be, oh, I'm so inferior, I'm such a sinner, please forgive me, and all of that. But you probably want to look at what the master represents in his non-dual samadhi, and how he was universally minded and accepted all religions as being identical in essence. Any of those teachings then would come up. You begin to not only understand the meaning of what non-duality is, but you begin to experience it. That's how immediate it is. The minute you put your mind on, say, nature's transforming all the time, then must not be Brahman, then you're footing. But yet Brahman's in it, isn't it? Because without Brahman, it wouldn't be there. Yes, but you But you take Brahman away, none of this would be there. But if you take everything else away and not Brahman, then what would be there? You see, that would be your consciousness. And then you would have to proclaim, I am that thou art. Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. And all of a sudden, you're just immediately, within just a few movements of your mind, you're immediately there with it, in the truth. That's the truth. You just had it. And as Nikhil just said, it's so hard to keep a hold of that. But I'd say it's very subtle, but if you keep tussling with it, well, with bulldog tenacity, that you want to hold on to something simple. It's the hardest thing to do, isn't it? Because when you're saying your mantra, which is one of the great practices towards it, it'd be like, oh, forgive me, Lord, for saying your name, because I know you don't have any names, but here I am with my beads, reciting the mantra. So that's like pure non-duality. But at the same time, when you're tussling with it like that, how difficult it is just to keep your mind repeating the mantra. Holy Mother said it's like digging the dry earth with a spade. It's just very boring. She admitted how it can be just very boring. But you'd notice someone else pick up the beads, like our founder, like Sixon, and he's like weeping, you see. So the taste of the Lord is very sweet. The taste of his name is very sweet. All of a sudden, this transcends, forgive me, Lord, for chanting your name. Or because when you were chanting the name, you were doing it as a practice rather than as a principle. And you were worshiping the Lord as a personality rather than a principle. So all of these doors begin to open up to you. And when they open up, it doesn't close the other ones. That's the thing about Advaita Vedanta, that those people who are declaring, I am that, when they haven't realized it yet, do not understand, is that it doesn't close the doors on everything else. Advaita Vedanta is the open door into everything, into understanding what it is and how it exists, that it exists. You have that hands-on, close-up understanding of the all-pervasiveness. I just chanted that. Sarvavyapi was that out of the Avadhuta Gita. I just chanted that it's there in everything as the formless reality. You just can't see it, like you can't see atoms in objects. You can't see them, that Brahman tucked away in everything. And so you mistake the thing for it, classic mistake. Oh, I see Brahman in everything. Well, here, let's talk about that. So what is it you're seeing? Who's this here? You start examining it from the standpoint of this precious microscope of Advaita Vedanta. Look at it up, down, sideways, both sides now, all directions, and then find out that it opens the doors into all higher wisdom.
Parables, and would it be likened to this teaching of chameleon? I mean, what you were just talking about, the Vedanta, and how, because this parable of the chameleon, about how a person would come into the forest and see it in a different color every time they came back, and not knowing that it changes colors. That because I think having a better understanding on the nature of Brahman in that regards would be helpful for the aspirant.
Very much so. Yeah, very much so. That's, again, this qualified non-dualism. That's Vashishtadvaita, we call it. That's very important. So, I mean, let's say the sun, the ocean, anything you can take up in nature that reflects that teaching of non-dual Brahman by way of metaphor. Those things bring you much closer to understanding of what non-duality is. So you take you take recourse to, you take refuge in Brahman, and then you take recourse to the teachings, is how I would put that. And some of the teachings that are best, most explanatory are those metaphors that he used, like salt doll into an ocean, or goldfish released from the bowl into the ocean. He had these ways of explaining it by analogy and by metaphor, which immediately give you the taste of it. But then you kind of are looking for the meaning of the story, right? And you become momentarily satisfied, and then you walk away. But you forgot to sit down and pretend in your mind, envision in your mind that you're a goldfish, and then you put yourself in the bowl of the body mind mechanism, and then you put yourself in the ocean of the world, and then you take yourself out of the ocean of the world and you pour yourself into this new ocean. You renounce samsara sagara, that's the ocean of suffering, and now you're born into, or released into, the ocean of ananda sagara, the ocean of bliss. So you forgot to do that. You just heard the story and you said, I understand that, and you walked away. But you didn't actually go and use it in the laboratory of Vedanta and feel the experience of it. And maybe if you did it, you only did it once. You see what I'm saying? And you didn't come back the next morning and do it again and again and again. So it's what Patanjali says in the Yoga Sutras. There are 7 ways in which you prepare the mind for realization. The 7 methods of the mind, we call it. See, one of those is by selecting what is the most inspiring and pleasant, even, way of thinking about God, and taking it on, focusing upon it. The bhaktas would do that with the moods. I'm going to take on the fact that I'm the son of God, and my whole life I'm going to meditate upon being the child of God. Or my whole life I'm going to be meditating on the servant. I'm going to be the servant of God. There are 5 of those moods, as you know. And so with the Vedantist and the meditator and so forth, then that very same truth would apply, is that you'd have to have this constancy and this perseverance, this doggedness, this ruthlessness, and to go forward to this one ideal and keep it in the realm of experience, not just in the realm of thinking or philosophy. As we can philosophize ourselves blue in the face. That's probably why Krishna is blue. He's talking about all the teachings on the battlefield of Kurukshetra to Arjuna, but Arjuna is not yet there at that philosophical level where they're going to convince him. So he gives him a vision instead. See, Vishvarupa Darshanam gives him this vision, and all of a sudden Arjuna is brought up short. He doesn't know what to say, and talk about all of a sudden feeling very small. Now your ego just got dashed, because the ego isn't just something that inflates in pride. The ego is something that hangs onto things that hurts it, and broods about it and whimpers about it. And poor me, my family used to call that pissing and moaning. Oh, quit pissing and moaning. We tell each other. Develop that positive mental attitude and hold it. Then the doors will open for you. It's just bound to happen as a matter of course, but you'll never get anywhere with that negative spirit. So that's not, of course, just a psychological teaching. It's something that is a matter of transcending the gunas. As you get attached to one guna, it's like restlessness, like we have here, like in England and America and parts of Europe. See, just this restlessness without any sense to it anymore. It's like anyone could be able to step back from that and be the witness of it and say, "Oh, I see my mistake." But It's just all consuming. And at least it has a chance of leading towards something higher, whereas tamas, lethargy, doesn't have that chance. It's going to have to take recourse somehow to rajas in order to get itself out of lethargy, in order to be open to sattva. So this is all beautiful teachings that are particular to the Vedanta darshan of India, which Swamiji brought to us and gifted to us. So yes, you're very right about these great sayings. You meditate upon one of them. As Patanjali said, take one of those and meditate upon it. And master the mind with that method. There are many ways actually to master the mind. He listed 7 of them, but you have to focus in on one. You can't just say, oh, those are nice, and sort of walk away without choosing one and using it for a while. And that was the psychology behind my book, Manasana. I saw people doing asanas. I said, well, okay, whatever. Good for the body, whatever. Risky, but how about manasana? Let's start thinking about the positions of our mind. Someone wrote me just 2 or 3 days ago, I'm still working with your book, Manasana. And I'm trying to take some of these beautiful mental asanas or mental positions, take just one of them a week and master it and live in it for a while. So, someone heard me out there when I told them to use that as a practice, not just as a book to read. Take it up, put it into practice, and watch the positive changes come about. These, if transformation is something we want to eventually transcend, then we want to transcend it by the most positive transformations we can. So if there's any beneficial transformation to be had, Swamiji said, it would be that of the mind. We want our mind to transform. Yes, Imre, are you gesturing?
Yes, Namaste Babaji and Namaste all. Thank you very much for this very deep unfolding. And I would like to ask a very important question. Maybe sounds silly, but what is? So the question is very simply vrittis, because right now I'm reading the footfalls and at the chart of Krishna and Akrishna vrittis, and I'm consciousness. And right now I would like to clarify, or I've been wondering what a vritti is, and also have had recently the experience that when I have a mode of observation, or let's say sort of witness consciousness, probably, sometimes there is a reflective moment and there is abundance. So there is an event, and there is so I can observe that my mind is putting forward various analogies and interpretations of that event. And sometimes I puzzle that, okay, I can see that my mind is reacting in various ways. Shall I choose any of them? And what is it? What is this at all? And then it came to my mind, okay, maybe these are these vrittis, these turnings, and if I'm just pooped into one of them, I can just go on and on and on, and hooked on an interpretation, or hooked on a stream, or actually this is it's just boiled down to this simple question: what is the vritti and how does it come to be at all? And maybe it's really, and then of course it goes on like, okay, it's related to time, it's related to matter. This is the thing from which non-attachment is very important. But then if I'm just frozen, let's say frozen in this kind of mode of witnessing, it's like sticking into this emptiness. And then how is it to relate? So it became a dilemma, how to resolve the whole process.
Yeah.
And vrittis.
Yeah, very good. I just have 5 minutes to address that, but it would take the word vritti, which is vibration of the mind or a thought, apart and look at it like that. What you were just saying is that these thoughts come up and you've got these choices, and then you want to choose one. I would say, I was just talking about that in terms of, say, these 5 moods that the devotee develops with God, or the 7 types of mastering the mind. Those are great thoughts. So you would choose one of those and you would take it yourself and you'd practice it. But in the case of vrittis, if you have a choice to choose them, I would say get rid of them all. Don't choose any, because you want to be vrittiless. In terms of the teaching, choose one and make it your own. That's going to help you. But the thoughts wandering through the mind, even at an intellectual level, this is, we have to learn how to detach from the vrittis of our mind. So, Father of Yoga has 2 classes of vritti. The chitta vrittis are, mind stuff, things that are going through the mind in form of thoughts. Thought is father of the deed, and it's also what people don't know, it's also the father of the object out here. The thought turns into the object out here. But basically, the 2 modes of thought are klista, not klista vrittis, right? Klista vrittis are pain-bearing. Klista vrittis are not pain-bearing. So if you want to make your way through the morass of thoughts in your mind, then you have to select. You have to look at the klista vrittis and not select any of them. See, they all have to go. So the meditator's object is to release the mind from thinking, isn't it? That's what. I've never liked that as a very complete rendering of what you do in meditation, because to me, meditation is, you want to come upon the ishtam. Then from the ishtam you can get even beyond the ishtam into Brahman. So there are better uses for meditation, but this is going to be necessary because you'll encounter the klista vrittis, the pain-bearing thoughts, when you start meditating. And there you're going to have to say, there's a kind of pain and pleasure that's mixed in a lot of your thoughts. So you can't just say, oh, I got rid of my pain-bearing thoughts, but now I've got my pleasure-bearing thoughts, and I'm really happy now. Thank you for the meditation. Because that pleasure is also going to limit you from getting beyond the dualities of pain and pleasure and thinking about them. So you've missed the point there about non-thinking. We want to see what it's like not to think. I think some 11 seconds of non-thinking is a samadhi, according to the father of yoga. If you can do it, but try it. And how long can you hold your mind in a vrittiless state is a great experience. And it's like breathlessness. You're holding your breath, but the mind also breathes. It breathes in, it holds, and it breathes out. That's called no thought, and then absence of thought. So you have to, as you would as a kid, practice holding your breath and time it and everything. Now you want to kind of at an elementary level teach the restless mind to quit thinking for a certain amount of time. Hold your breath, hold the breath of the mind. And in that way, then you might be able to experience kumbhaka samadhi or nidra samadhi, the absence of all thoughts, vrittiless, period. So that's what comes to mind in the short amount of time. When you say be selective, that means selective about the teachings that are going to help you in your spiritual life. When it comes to overall thoughts, you don't select them, you dissolve them. So let us move on then. Om Shanta Mahanto Nivashanti Shanto Shantavat Lokahitam Charantaha. There are luminaries on this earth, silent, great, deep, who, like the spring season, bring about the well-being of the world. So may peace come unto all. May higher wisdom dawn upon all. May all see the face of truth and be fortified by the armor of love and goodwill. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat.